Have you ever noticed how quickly a disagreement online can escalate into full-blown hostility? Just recently, a simple debate about a global event turned friends into bitter opponents on social media. It's like a small war breaking out in our own digital neighborhoods. But why do humans seem so drawn to conflict, not just online, but throughout history and even today? In this video, we'll explore the deep psychology behind war, tracing its roots from the very first battles in human history to the ongoing conflicts shaping our world in 2025. We'll uncover what drives us to fight, what triggers war, and how understanding these forces might help us break the cycle. The first wars in human history. The first known organized war in recorded history happened around 2700 BC in Mesopotamia, between the city-states of Sumer and Elam. Enumbragesi, the king of Kish, led the Sumerians to victory, but evidence of violent conflict goes back even further. Archaeologists have found signs of prehistoric warfare dating back over 13,000 years near the Nile River in Sudan, where mass graves show repeated attacks between hunter-gatherer groups. Why did these early conflicts happen? Most likely over resources, food, land, shelter, as humans began settling and farming. As societies grew, competition for limited resources intensified, sparking conflicts that escalated into wars. The first major recorded war that shaped history was the Battle of Megiddo in the 15th century BC, fought by Egyptian pharaoh Thutmose III against a coalition of Canaanite city-states. This battle set a precedent for organized, large-scale warfare driven by territorial control and political power. If you're curious to understand why humans have fought since the dawn of time and want to explore how this affects us today, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss out on our deep dives into history and psychology. The psychology and philosophy of war. Why do humans fight? The answer lies deep in our psychology and philosophy. Sigmund Freud proposed that humans possess a death drive, a subconscious urge toward destruction and aggression. Carl Jung introduced the idea of the shadow, the darker part of our psyche we deny and often project onto others, creating enemies out of our own fears and insecurities. Philosophers have long debated human nature and conflict. Thomas Hobbes famously described life without government as nasty, brutish, and short, arguing that humans naturally compete and fight for survival. In contrast, Jean-Jacques Rousseau believed humans were peaceful by nature and that society's inequalities bred conflict. Modern psychology confirms that conflict arises from a mix of biological impulses, social structures, and perceived threats. Fear, identity, and the need for belonging often trigger defensive aggression. When people feel their survival, values, or status are threatened, they are more likely to resort to violence. Historic and modern wars. Causes and consequences. Throughout history, wars have been fought for many reasons: territory, resources, religion, revenge, or political change. The world wars of the 20th century were driven by nationalism, alliances, and imperial ambitions, resulting in unprecedented destruction and loss of life. More recently, the Syrian Civil War, starting in 2011, began as a protest movement but escalated into a brutal conflict fueled by ethnic, religious, and geopolitical tensions. Since 2020, conflicts continue worldwide. The Russia-Ukraine war has reshaped global alliances and caused massive humanitarian crises. Tensions between China and Taiwan have escalated, and conflicts in the Middle East and Africa persist. These wars show how old patterns of fear, power struggles, and identity politics still drive conflict today. How we create enemies and why it matters. Humans have a psychological need to define us versus them. Creating enemies helps build group identity and justify conflict. But this process often dehumanizes the other side, making violence easier to accept. Social media and modern propaganda amplify this enemy making. Algorithms feed us information that reinforces our beliefs and fears, deepening divisions. For example, during the 2020 US elections, misinformation and hate speech surged, fracturing communities and families. Have you ever blocked or unfriended someone because their views felt threatening? That's a small-scale example of how enemy creation works. Case studies and theories on war. Lawrence Keeley, in his book War Before Civilization, argues that prehistoric societies were often more violent than modern ones, challenging the idea that war is a product of civilization. Pierre Clastre suggested that some early societies used war to maintain social balance and prevent the rise of oppressive rulers. The just war theory, developed by thinkers like Augustine and Aquinas, tries to set ethical limits on war, emphasizing justice, proportionality, and the protection of innocence. These perspectives show that war is complex, rooted in human nature, culture, and morality. How to break the cycle. Understanding the psychology of war isn't just academic, it can change how we live. Here are 3 steps you can apply today. Recognize your shadow. When you feel anger or fear towards someone, ask if you are projecting your own insecurities. Seek dialogue. Try to understand opposing views without judgment. Even online, a simple "I hear you" can reduce tension. Promote empathy. Remember that behind every enemy is a human being with fears and hopes. If this video changed the way you think about conflict and human nature, please like, share, and subscribe. Join our community as we uncover how understanding ourselves can help build a more peaceful world. So, are humans destined to fight forever, or can we evolve beyond our violent instincts? Ask yourself, who do you see as your enemy, and what would happen if you tried to see them as human? Thanks for watching. Stay curious, stay kind, and see you next time.